Hey everyone, in this video we'll be talking about several strategies on how to target cold leads as well as tips to help you get the most out of your cold emails. So first and foremost, what is a cold lead? Cold lead basically is a lead that you mail out of nowhere. They don't really know you. They're not warmed up. They know nothing about you. So it's a little different than if there's like a warm lead that already knows who you are, or if it's like a referral or someone already on like a mailing list of yours. That would be a warm lead. So when you send an email to a cold lead, there's several things that you should keep in mind. First and foremost, you definitely want to make sure that, especially if you're mailing more than let's say a dozen or a couple dozen leads, you want to make sure that you use, a very good cold lead mailer. What we recommend is first you get an account with essentially Google Workspace, which is owned by Google, and they have a feature that is basically designed to help with cold email. So, rather than fighting against, essentially Google and Gmail, why not work with them right there? They're pretty inexpensive. Like I think they're about like $6 a month or so. But on top of that, you'll want to also have an email service that works with them. We recommend Business Emailer, and that's one that can essentially integrate with your Google Workspace and make it super easy to send emails, add multiple messages there, and all that.
Well, and let me jump in, Brian. So a couple of things about using Google Workspace. First of all, a lot of people think everybody just has personal Gmail. More than 60% of small and mid-sized businesses use Gmail as their main email for business. More than half the businesses right there. So there's like 50, 60, 70 million businesses. And the other thing is that Google's going to deliver better to Google. Pretty obvious, right? It's like, hey, we know where it came from. It's us. And that's why there are more than 2 billion accounts associated with Gmail and Google Workspace, which gives you a huge edge up in being able to do this. The other thing about using Business Emailer to integrate is that if you want to import leads into Google Workspace to use them to mail to them, there's a complicated manual procedure that's basically format a file, create a Google worksheet, add macro instructions like a script to the Google worksheet, mail merge it into your Gmail account that's in Google Workspace, and then mail it. All of that is liable to get screwed up. You're going to have errors. You're going to have problems. Business Emailer does all of this automatically for you, so you don't have to actually become a technical wizard just to send email, right?
That's why we highly suggest the Business Emailer, because it makes it a lot easier. You don't have to be a techie at all. Super, super simple. So once you have the mailing side set aside, which you should now, the second part is how exactly should you go about targeting these cold leads? Well, there are several different strategies that you can do. First and foremost, you want to make sure that the lead source that you're actually getting these leads from is a legit one, that they're actually good leads to start with. We recommend Macro Leads to help with that. That's a service that we have. But more specifically, there's two main ways that you can basically target leads. One is more essentially general, where you try to target like everyone if you have a specific offer that you think might appeal to like a bunch of people. That can work in some cases, but in a lot of cases, I find a strategy that works even better is to basically go after a lot more of a narrow market with a very specific message. So let's say, you sell some kind of a service, whether it be like an SEO service, whether it be like a printing service, whether it be accounting or anything like that, anything at all. You want to, instead of just saying like, hey, I can do SEO, hey, I can do accounting, hey, I can help with tax benefits, whatever it might be, you say, hey, I help with X for Y, and the Y might be like dentists or chiropractors or fulfillment centers or whatever it might be. 1 week you can basically target, let's say, dentists, and you can say, in your cold email, hey, I'm so-and-so, I help essentially dentists rank better on Google, or I help dentists, with their accounting needs, or I help dentists find extra tax credits, or, I help dentists with whatever it might be. Because why that helps is, first, it sounds a little more personalized. You're not just randomly emailing random leads. A lot of people kind of turn that down, like, hey, that's just kind of spammy in their eyes. But if you're specifically targeting that specific niche of like dentists or basically chiropractors or hotels or, whatever it might be, whether it be an online business or offline, it's a little more personalized and they're more likely to respond to that right there. So that's a strategy that can work real well. And you don't have to specifically mention their business, because again, if you're trying to mail, let's say 100 leads at a time, or 1,000 leads at a time, or 2,000 leads at a time, that'd take a heck of a lot of time to try to mention each one by name right there. So if you try to narrow it down, and I'm not saying like, hey, you have to only email dentists and that's what you're stuck with. I'm saying each week you can be a different one. Like one week you can specialize in dentists, another week you can specialize in accounting firms, whatever it might be. It doesn't matter because again, the service you're selling can probably adapt to all those guys right there. So that's first and foremost definitely what you want to keep in mind there. The other thing is you want to look at the value of those leads, and that will basically determine how much time and effort you want to put into those. For instance, let's say you know a niche where there might only be like a dozen businesses in it, like a very small niche. Obviously, if you have a niche like basically dentists, you're probably talking to like tens of thousands of leads, if not a lot more actually. But if you're talking like a super high-end thing where there might only be a dozen businesses, it might be worth your time to research each of those individually, especially if like the value might be like, $100,000 plus in profit for you. Probably worth your time to research it a bit, and when you send the individual email, to kind of personalize it specifically for the business. So those are ones that you might want to, instead of sending like bulk email to a bunch of leads, you might want to individually target them and send like them one by one. But that's only worthwhile if we're talking like a dozen or less leads and like really high volume or high profitability where they're worth like a ton of dough, and you kind of want to spend some time researching them, knowing a bit about them. And in that case, in the email, you could say, hey, I'm so and so, I specialize in X, Y, and Z. I see that your essentially business does this, and after some research, I found that you're probably leaving approximately this much behind in money, or you can probably rank X amount better, or whatever your service might be. You give some personalized tips right there. But if you're going for more generically, where the leads might not be worth as much, like maybe they're worth like thousands or tens of thousands instead of hundreds of thousands or millions a piece, that's where you want to go with the first method we said, where you maybe target like all the dentists or all the chiropractors or all the shirt makers or whatever it might be, with still a personalized message, but doesn't have to be specifically personalized to that specific business right there. And then you can mail like 1,000 at a time or so and not have an issue with that. So next we'll basically move on to a handful of tips on what you should say, how you should respond, so on and so forth. So one of the big mistakes I often see is people send out a bunch of emails, they get some responses, and they're like, oh crap. Someone wrote back. What do I say? What do I do? And they think about it for like 3 or 4 days, especially if it's like a high value business that might be worth a lot of money. People tend to think way basically too long, and they might take 3 days to write back because they want the perfect reply. Well, in the business world, especially the decision makers, they move fast. So if they write back, they'll be impressed if you write back like, that same day, or like even like, let's say an hour or two later, that looks really good. Whereas if you write back like 2 or 3 days later, they might be moving on to the next thing. So you don't have to have the perfect response or anything like that. You just have to have some kind of a response back. And Sean, I'll let you basically talk about some more tips on what to say, in the email itself, as well as on the responses and anything else there on the cold email side.
Sure. A key thing is going to be your subject line. Your subject line when you send the email has got to get their attention. It has to be accurate. So you can't be like, hey, get, $1 million, click here, right? I mean, that's obviously not going to work. It's not going to create a relationship, but you do need something that gets people's attention. You want to be as brief as you can be in the initial email and still get your point across to generate interest. Your initial email's goal should be to generate interest and generate a response. That response might be, first of all, you want it to be low friction. You don't want it to be, fill out this form, give me your credit card and I'll charge you $1,000. You generally are going to want a response that is email me back, or a click here to get a free report, watch a free video, get some information, watch this auto webinar, whatever it might be that you need them to do that's a next step to move them along your sales funnel. In this email, you want to show value, how you're going to give them something valuable both for their time and in the end it's going to benefit their business in some way. It's going to make their life easier, save them money, make them money, whatever that might be, and anything you can do to add credibility. Now, that doesn't mean you need to give them in your entire resume. It doesn't mean you need to have 57 testimonials, but you do need something in there that's going to help make whatever your promise is believable, right? So don't just send an email and say, hey, listen, I'm really smart and you should hire me. You need to be a little more creative than that and a little more to the point. Brian outlined some of the things you can do, which I think are all really good, and you just want want to play around with it. And the last tip really is you're going to be able to send a lot of emails is test. So test the subject line, test the body, see what gets the most response. It's probably not what you try the first time. It's probably not initially what you think because you are not actually the prospect. And then the other part of this is that you can follow up. Just because you emailed somebody one time and they didn't respond, they might not have even seen it. Average business person gets more than 100 emails a day. Email works. That's why they get so much email and you get so much email. But you might want to follow up with them and have a series of messages. It might be 3 or 5 or 7 that are spaced every other day, but that kind of follow along a sequence of, I contacted you the other day, wanted to follow up because this is really important. We've helped a lot of dentists just like you to do X, Y, and Z. We'd love the opportunity to show you what we can do and how this is going to really benefit your practice and make your life easier, save you money, whatever that might be. And then the third and fourth and fifth, and you can use different subject lines and different follow-ups and offer different response mechanisms that they can have. Hey, email me back or set up an appointment or, check out this video on YouTube that we made that explains it or whatever that might be. But you don't just quit just because you started and the first person didn't respond. And don't just email one business and be like, it doesn't work. Because if you go for volume, this is a volume game. It's all a numbers game. You test, you follow up, you're going to get results. So Brian, I'm going to let you wrap up any last things you want to add and we'll call this training complete.
Those are great points, sir. I think that the main thing, not only on the initial email, but also on the responses, don't make them jump through hoops. Again, these are oftentimes business owners or basically decision makers that don't necessarily have a lot of time or don't maybe want to waste a lot of time. So make, the message short and sweet, get basically the point across fast, clearly demonstrate what the value is or what they get out of it so that without them having to dive through like 3 or 4 or 5 steps there. So with that, guys, hope you learned some good info here. And again, we think that the cold email is one of the most underused forms of marketing out there. A lot of the big businesses out there have been basically doing this for years and years and years, but a lot of the small and mid-sized ones have been almost completely ignoring this because they've been told like, oh, you have to have warm leads. It's all great if you can do that, but at the same time, if you can provide value for a lot of business, they want to hear from you. If there's a business that could save me a lot of money or make me a lot of money or have a service that I want to hear from them. I don't care if I don't know you at all. Send those emails. Hope that this training helps and we'll see you guys soon. Thanks.